Is there anything that you have to say that you would like people to know about what you've gone through with the loss of your mother to domestic violence?
I would say that losing a loved one through domestic violence is really hard, and domestic violence.
What's good, everybody? You guys, in today's vlog, we have an event that is a must for any woman that's out here struggling with domestic violence or any issues. This is one of these kind of vlogs where it's not pretty, it's not meant to be, funny or entertaining. These are real stories from real women that have been through a lot. Renee, tell them a little about the event.
Hi, my name is Renee Beck Santiago. We're here live at Divino Gelato Cafe in Racine, and we are here for a domestic violence event in remembrance of Angelica Rios-Bueno, who was killed by her ex in May of 2019. And we will be hearing personal stories from her family and friends and other domestic violence survivors, including myself, in this event today. And this event, like Hamin said, is not an easy piece to watch. It is very heartbreaking, and it has very personal stories from women who were beaten and abused and almost killed by their perpetrator. And tonight we are here in remembrance of her and hope to stop domestic violence in this community and other communities nationwide. And we would love you to pay close attention and share this to any family or friend or anyone you know struggling with domestic violence right now.
Okay, so you guys, we're about to walk in right now and see what's going on with this event.
Come in. It's raining. It's pouring. Pleasure meeting you tonight. Are you on Facebook? I am with Reed. Okay. I'm Renee.
Ojeda, Sherry Hopkins, and Renee Beck Santiago sharing their brave stories. We'll also have information provided by the Women's Resource Center and attorney Jamie McClendon. We'll now begin with our speakers. Please welcome Michelle Levanti.
Hi, my name is Michelle Avanti. To be honest, this is the first time anyone's ever asked me to speak or share my story, but it's something that I've thought about for a long time. I don't claim my story to be any better or any worse than anybody else's. I've actually never considered myself a victim or anything like that. I'm not one to hold grudges, but there are always underlying feelings that we carry. They're like badges we carry to identify ourselves. They are the things that make us who we are. We just can't let these badges become too heavy that they drag us down or hold us back. It wasn't until about a year ago that I decided to let some things go, and believe me, it was a long time coming. I started a spiritual journey that opened up my eyes to a great many things, one of which is the fact that sharing your story is a testimony as to all that God has done good in your life, even if at that time it didn't seem good. So I'd like to think that those challenges were learning experiences that define my character. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Mexican by birth and I was born in El Paso, but I didn't realize this until I was in my 20s because I was adopted at 3 months old by a great family and I grew up in Connecticut. Now let me tell you that growing up in a predominantly white, affluent town isn't all that it's cracked up to be. I struggled with my identity my whole life as I was a dark-skinned, dark-haired, chubby girl. My adoption story is actually another whole testimony, but since that's not what I'm here to speak about, I just wanted to share it so you get an idea of where I'm coming from. My sister was their natural child, and she was tall and thin. My parents were Italian and Slovak. I related more to the Italian side, and I always identified myself as such as I grew up being asked if I was Alaskan, Hawaiian, I didn't know. So, although I made friends easily, I never had a boyfriend in high school. I didn't go to parties, I didn't go to proms. My parents were great. They were married until the day my dad passed a few years ago. So domestic violence wasn't something I grew up around or anything like that. But I wanted to have a relationship like they had. I wanted someone to love me, and I craved it. I learned from years of therapy that being adopted left me with a deep-seated fear of abandonment. So about a month after high school graduation, I went to a cool kids party in a nearby town, and I hooked up with a guy named Mike. I actually had friends tell me that I was in now, because I wanted so bad to hang out in this Italian neighborhood in a nearby city. It was the place to be, and I was looking to fit in somewhere. I worked full-time, and I started partying, and I threw crazy parties at my parents' house, so much so that they kicked me out when I was 17. It just spiraled into a party lifestyle that lasted for about 15 years after that. So Mike's nickname was Igor, if that tells you anything about what he looked like. But he was popular. Everyone knew him. Everyone loved him. I like to think he was like the comic relief of our neighborhood. Everyone loved to tell stories about his crazy antics. Unfortunately, some of those antics included me. His family was fresh off the boat Italian. His mom didn't speak English. His dad wasn't in the picture, and he wasn't the nicest of guys. His mindset was that women belonged home and in the kitchen, so we didn't really date. I'd go places with my friends. He'd yell and scream and send me home. Actually, he'd chase me home. I remember going to a festival at an Italian church, and that was the first public display of abuse. I was with my girlfriends. He saw me there and told me to go home. I was like, no way. So he punched me right in my face, dead in my eyes, spit at me, kicked me, and told me to go home. Everyone was in shock, but no one did anything. I pretended to leave and snuck around the whole night. Instances like this became commonplace. No one boosted me enough to say that it wasn't right, and I thought a fresh start would do us good and maybe we could get clean and start over. We weren't even here a few months, but the same pattern started over and over again. The abuse, the infidelity, the drugs. Finally, in August of 2000, his daughter, who was 8 at the time, came for a visit. She was here for like 5 days, and I spent 4 of those days so messed up on drugs that I finally decided I needed help. I went to a rehab facility in Florida, and I was there for a month. And of course, they told me to change my surroundings and had encouraged me to stay there, but I had to go home to Raphael. I remember him picking me up from the airport with flowers in one hand and a bottle in the other, and took me to a party where everyone was doing drugs.
A couple weeks later, I found out I was pregnant with my son, and I decided that was it. By this time, Raphael had been already cheating on me with someone else, and I found the strength to kick him out. My son was born on May 23, 2001. He unfortunately has never received any kind of aid or support from his dad. But I always swore to him from the moment of his birth that I would take care of him despite everything else, and I hope that I've always done so. I still have no ill words towards his dad, who's currently and often spends time in jail. He was actually diagnosed as schizophrenic bipolar some years ago and has abused every partner since me. Regardless, I still don't speak ill about him and keep him in my prayers. My son stays in contact with his 3 sisters, and his family is still considered ours. Carrying anger or guilt, sadness or fear, it just doesn't serve me, so I let it go. I had a best friend tell me once that I had to change my life because I had my kid. I reminded her that it was a choice. The foster care is full of kids whose moms didn't make that same choice. Unfortunately, that best friend died of an overdose a few years later. I did have one more serious case of domestic abuse because, yes, these become habits and they die hard. After my son was born, I struggled with my self-esteem and my weight. I went out with a guy on a few dates, and right away I started to get that bad feeling, so I broke it off. By now, I've learned the signs. Then one day, I went to pick up my son from daycare, and this guy was there at the daycare in the room with my son. I was shocked as to how this could have happened, but somehow he charmed his way in because most abusers are very charming. He told me to get someone to pick my son as I was coming with him, and if I didn't find someone, my son was coming too. So I called a friend and left with him. He threatened me and my son. I knew him to carry a gun, and so I went with him. He took me to the north side of Milwaukee. He kept me captive in a house, and he beat me, choked me unconscious, and took my phone. I was there for hours and thought I was going to die. He finally left, and his brother came, and I begged him and offered him money if he could just take me to an ATM. When he took me, and when we got to the bank, I took off running and got away. I filed a police report, got a restraining order, took my son out of that daycare, told all of my neighbors, hung flyers with his pictures, and moved a week later. They didn't have enough evidence to press charges, but found him to violate his probation, so he went back to prison. Thank God I never ran into him again. I recently read a post on Facebook that how family and friends do too little too late to help domestic abuse victims. I don't think that that's true. I just think that they don't know what to do. My hope today is for you to encourage anyone you know that's going through similar stuff. Don't call them stupid if they don't leave. Don't judge the decisions they make, but rather lift them up. Lift them in prayer, lift them in encouragement, help them feel empowered, help lift their self-esteem, show them their value and their worth. Let them know there is hope and to have faith. Help your daughters. Help your daughters learn the warning signs. Tell them to follow their intuition and their gut, because that's usually going to be right. Show them the love of God, how to love themselves, and what true love looks like. Remind them that they can't control other people, only how they react to them. My life isn't perfect, and I've made plenty of mistakes on a regular basis, but I fill my own cup until it runs over now. I'm conscious of my thoughts and my energy, and I thank God that He's forgiven me for my shortcomings and that I found the strength to forgive myself. I know that no one can go back and start at the beginning, but anyone can start now and create a new ending. And so feel free to reach out to me if you ever need someone to talk to, because I'm here. If you ever feel alone, just reach out.
Thank you so much for sharing your story today. We'd now please welcome Daisy Tejeda.
Hello, my name is Daisy Tejeda. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I come from a Mexican immigrant family. I'm first generation. I come from a very loving home. My parents have been married for 45 years now. And I always strive to have a marriage, a family the way that my parents had it. I saw both of them sacrifice everything for me and my sibling. And as I grew up, my parents encouraged education. Education, education, education. And I did. I went to school, I graduated. As I stand here before you, I'm an educator. And which is one of the reasons I think why Cindy had wanted to see different backgrounds of different people. It doesn't matter where you're from, how much education you have. Domestic violence can hit anyone, anywhere. My story begins with someone I had met through two friends. He, like me, first generation Mexican, but unlike me, didn't have functioning parents. So charming, funny, everything that was opposite of what I thought I was, and I wanted that. And so we go out on a few dates. He shows me a complete different side of him, like so nice, so easy to get along with, and funny. And I repeat that because later on, I become part of that funny for him. And about 6 months into dating, we decide to move in together. We move in, things are good at first. Then something happened. He loved drinking. He loved drinking. I don't live drinking the way that he did. And he would drive that way. And he's not coming home, and he's not coming. I'm ringing his phone, and I'm concerned at this point because he had told me he was going to come back early. Well, find out that he was out drinking with his buddies, and he came home extremely drunk. And my concern was, you could have hurt somebody, you could have hurt yourself, all those things. And that concern that I had for him ultimately was what triggered him to know that he now had a sense of control over me, because that's how he took it. He took my caring, my being worried as a control. This person wants to be with me. Daisy wants to be with me. She's not going to leave me. As our relationship continued, I stayed with him. He continued to come home drunk. He would stay out till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd call me all kinds of names. He would call me at 2 o'clock in the morning and be like, where are you? Who are you with? You're probably laying down next to somebody else. I'm going to get there, and if somebody else is there, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to beat him. And it wasn't like that at all. I was at home, sleeping, to wake up to go to work. I continued the relationship, and about a year after we had moved in together, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so I'm originally from Chicago. We moved from Chicago to Wisconsin because I get the opportunity to teach. And we buy this beautiful home. We start going on these amazing vacations. Everybody thinks that everything that we have is an amazing relationship. They think that, one of our friends quoted us as a power couple. You guys are the power couple. Little did they know of everything that was happening behind closed doors. I would come home from work to somebody who, because it was my first year teaching and I had to go through certification, I had classes that I had to attend, and then I was also doing the after school program. I would come home and he would tell me, you weren't working. I bet you were probably sleeping with somebody else, and blah, blah, blah. Because I called my mom and I told her you weren't here, and she said that you're probably not even teaching, because my aunt's a teacher and she doesn't stay at work that long. And that's how things began. And the physical part gets in later, but it begins this way. And I start, I swear to God, you can go check, you can call my principal, you can, all these things that I would tell him, like, it's not true, like, please. And that was that control that he had over me. And so as the relationship continues, one day we're both in Chicago, and it was in the summer. And I was teaching summer school that year, so I had to be at work the next day early for my first day of training for summer school. There was some game going on, I don't know for what, and I told him, I said, just please remember that I have to get up early tomorrow, so don't stay out late because we gotta go home. And he's like, yeah, no, I know. So he dropped me off at my parents' house. It was at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm texting him to see where he's at because I have to be at work I have to get up at 6. And so then I'm texting him, he finally gets there, and I'm like, really? And the minute I said saying really, he tells me, shut the F up, you're so stupid, blah, blah, blah. We're driving, we're on the west side of Chicago. He pulls his truck over, and he tells me to get the F out of his car, and I'm walking by myself on Cicero Avenue, on Cermak and Cicero. And because he literally had pushed me out of the truck. And I had left my purse and everything in there. And he pulls up, and I'm like, I just want my purse. And when I go to reach for my purse, he reaches and he pulls me in. He's like, just get in the car, I'm just gonna drop you off at your parents' house. He drops me off at my parents' house. I get up in the morning, I had to ask my dad if I could borrow his car to go to work. And my dad looks at me and he tells me, he's like, I'm not gonna ask you at this moment what happened, but just remember that I never did that to you or your sister or your mother. You deserve better. Fast forward a few months after that, because he apologized and I'm so sorry and bought me flowers and all this other stuff. And a few months later, again, we're in Chicago and he's drunk. And he said something making fun of me about something personally. And I was like, that's not funny. And he's like, oh, to me it is funny. He's like, you're nothing but a joke and whatever. And so then he went to try to push me. I blocked him, but by the time I blocked him, he grabbed my arm and he twisted my arm to the point where I had really bad bruises all over my arm. I get out of his car. I wasn't far from my parents' house. I run to my parents' house, and I didn't say anything. I didn't tell them what had happened, nothing. But the next day, my niece, who grew up with me, they're both my nieces. I have one sister, she has 2 daughters. They're like my little sisters. And my niece sees my arm, and she said, what is that? And I said, oh, it's nothing. She said, no, it was him. I know it was him. And that hurt, because I wanted to be a role model for my nieces. But I'm now modeling that it's okay to put up with this behavior and even lying and hiding it. She went, and so powerfully, she went and told my mom what had happened. She said, Daisy has a big bruise on her arm, and I know it was him. So my mom asked me, let me see your arm. I didn't want to talk about it. My mom calls him, and she tells him directly, let this be the first and the last time that I ever see a bruise on my daughter. Well, it wasn't the last time. She just didn't know there were more times. That relationship continued, and I stayed in it for 5 years until I finally had enough. I had enough when I had to get up to take an exam one morning, and he knew it was extremely important. And he had the habit of knowing that whenever I had something important to do, work-related or school-related, he would wake me up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning over something so stupid just to get me off track so that I didn't fail my exam or fail what I had to do at work. And that day, it was about 2-something in the morning when I was already sleeping. He walks in the bedroom and he takes the blankets off of me. He's like, the sheets aren't on right. And I'm like, really, you're waking me up for this? You know I have to get up and do a test tomorrow morning. I don't care, whatever. And so I tried to ignore him. I turned around. And then I was going to turn back around and tell him, like, you know, like, why, like, kind of just to tell him how, you know, inconsiderate he was. And when I go to turn around, I see his arm in the air, ready to hit me. He was going to hit me as my back was turned. And that was the day that I decided this was enough. And I grabbed his arm, and we went at it. We fought This is why I never thought I was a victim of domestic abuse, because every time he would fight, I would fight back. And I figured, I'm not a victim because I'm fighting him back. I'm not just letting him hit me, I hit him back too. No, I was defending myself. And that day I had had enough. When he went to hit me, I grabbed his arm in midair. And we boxed. It was bad. We fought so bad. The next day, one of my coworkers, who was my assistant at the time, she knew right away something had happened. And I told her, I said, I had enough. Enough is enough. I can't do this anymore. I'm like, he knew I had to wake up and take this exam. He knew I had to go do these things, and he did this anyways. I said, and we got into such a big fight. I'm moving out. I didn't tell him. I just grabbed my stuff. I started leaving. I was lucky that my parents were there to give me full support, and I was able to move into a safe place for some time. And for a while, he left me alone. But then I was extremely in love with this person. I thought that I could never love anybody more than I loved him, and that was the control he had. I loved him more than I loved myself. And we started talking again. And I thought, okay, maybe we can give this another try. And the abuse continued. Again, with you're with somebody else, and this, that, the other. Long story short, from there, I decided that it was done, and I told him, there's nothing left here. The most I can offer you is my friendship. The most I can offer you is my friendship. Now, I had moved out of the house that we had purchased together. I had moved out. And he would come to my new house at 2 in the morning. He was already living in Chicago. He had moved back. And one night, I went out dancing with one of my friends. She dropped me off. I closed the door, and I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to go upstairs to my room. When there's a knock at my door, I thought it was my friend. So I go and I open it without even looking. It was him. He was so agitated. He was breathing heavy. And he had been waiting or watching me for I don't know how long. And that, I was so scared. But I knew in that moment that if I let him know that I was upset, it was going to get bad. And I didn't know what he had on him, because he has a carry and conceal. And that he had guns at his disposal. I knew that. So I let him in. I made it sound like everything was totally cool, like, oh, come on in. The next day, I called my dad right away, and I put a security system around my house. I still continued to be his friend. I wanted to try to be his friend. I wanted, in my eyes, give him hope, because he would tell me how hopeless he felt about things and whatnot. Finally, I couldn't. And I put an end to that. My dad had to step in. My mom had to step in. My mom worked for Cook County Jail for many, many years, and she had to call in a sheriff to get things in order. And my parents told me so many times to get out of that relationship. My sister begged me to get out of that. But when you feel like you're so in love with someone, and you feel like you can't live without that person, that's how I felt about him. It wasn't until I stepped out of the relationship and I started reflecting, and I knew that that was that control he was using over me. Throughout our relationship, I hated his mother. I hated her because she was a cause of so many of our problems. As I stepped out of that relationship, I realized it wasn't her fault. It's him. He's the problem. About a year after we had broken up, I met somebody else. And currently I'm married to him, and we have a beautiful daughter. One of the hardest things is being a person who was in a domestically abusive relationship is not knowing how to accept a good relationship. And my husband is an amazing man, and he is so kind-hearted. He's so kind that I don't believe it's real. I feel that I'm gonna wake up and it's gonna change. And I'm standing there and I'm waiting. It's like I'm just waiting for that change. And I had a good friend of mine tell me, you gotta let it go. One of the hardest things to do is to let that go. These scars, they stay deep. And even when you have something good, you're afraid because you feel like, is this real? I've never had this before. I came and when Cindy asked me to speak, I said yes, I jumped yes. For one, because of my friendship with Cindy and how much love I had for her, but more than anything for my daughter. As I think about everything that I went through, I would never want that for my daughter. Never. And I want her to know that I saw my mom as a strong woman. And my mom tried to help me. So please, if you know of anybody, if you are somebody that's going through this, speak up. Speak up, get help. You're not, just like the person said, you're not stupid. We're not stupid. We don't know how to get out of it. And our families also don't know how else to help us, but they are there. We are here, people are here to help you. We care. So please, I'm also here if anybody ever needs to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Sherry Hopkins, please.
So a few weeks ago, when Cindy told me that she was planning this event, in memory of Angie, I told her that I was thankful that she was in a place that made it possible for her to move on and to continue to honor Angie's life. Then when Cindy asked me if I would share my story as a survivor of domestic violence and abuse, I said it would be a privilege. At the time, I had no idea what I would say, and while preparing my story that I relived all of the trauma of my own experiences. Although my story of domestic violence and abuse began 40 years ago, the memories are just as vivid as if it happened yesterday.
Complete the restraining order because they have so many things that they have to do to get it done, and they have lives and they have children and they have jobs and they have bills to pay. As victims, we can't afford to take 3 days off of work in a month if it's our only income in our household. Since the incident happened to me, my life has completely changed. I'm hoping to continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger and help more and more people. And most of you see me in a really strong light on our YouTube channel and trying to help the community in domestic violence. And today is not a good day, and that's okay. And Angie would be okay with that. Today is not a good day for me because I relive in my head what she must have gone through and then the results that happened at the end. And I'm in counseling and I work out every day and I try to do things now to keep going, but we have to help victims of crimes. And it's not one person in the criminal justice system or at the DA's office or wherever that's causing this issue. It's a system problem. We have a system problem that we can't go to the criminal justice system or to the courts and we can't ask for help because they're like, oh, you have to be off work this day, you have to be off work that day, you have to fill out this entire huge packet. When you've just been victimized and hit and strangled by a man, do you have the energy to fill out huge packets? Is there anyone there to help us do that? We can barely walk in the door to the courtroom, to the courthouse, because we're so traumatized from the incident that just filling out those packets alone is a huge deal. And I don't think people realize how hard it really is. And I was a primary care provider in this town for 5 years. Suppose Angie took off 4 or 5 days of work that month. You know, she probably was thinking many things about her children and multiple different things that we all think of when we're victimized. And I lived in constant fear, and I still live in constant fear for the day that he gets out, that he will kill me. He has told authorities he will kill me when he gets out, and I believe he will. And I have taken many steps to try to make sure he's prosecuted and sent away for a long time, and I'm still hoping that we get that result. But we have to honor victims like Angelica Rios, who lost their lives to these crimes, and we have to use it to help other victims, and so that the deaths are decreased in this community about this event. And like I said, this is a really bad day for me. And we have good days and we have bad days. And we have to just be supportive in this community with these things that are happening. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. But you can, if you are a victim of domestic violence, and 9 times out of 10 there are people in this room that are right now, you have to take steps and you have to get your strength back to get out of the relationship. Because I have really started to get there again with my strength, and I hope I keep getting stronger and stronger to help other victims. And I have since got a new job as a nurse practitioner somewhere else, and I have since helped the community and since done a lot of things so we can get there. We can get out of those relationships and we can save our lives, and we can say, no, this is not okay that you're doing these things to me because I'm a victim of a crime, and keep moving forward and getting stronger.
I am the sister of Angelica Rios. This here is my family. This, what you see here, is what is left when you lose a loved one to domestic violence. A family that is broken, a family that is trying to figure out what the future looks like for us without our loved one. A family that is doing the best we can with our tragic situation. We thought we did all we could do to keep Angie safe, but it was not enough. We helped her leave her abuser. That was not enough. We would all randomly drive past her house to make sure she was okay. That was not enough. We constantly checked up on her. That was not enough. Angie left her abuser, but that was not enough. Angie had a gun for protection, but that was not enough. Angie reached out to his family to help him, but that was not enough. Angie watched her every move and would take different paths to get home to ensure no one was following her, but that was not enough. Angie tried to get him the mental health that he needed, but that was not enough. Nothing that we did was enough to help save Angie. My family and I intervened on numerous occasions, and it wasn't enough. What I am saying is that there is not enough that can be done to help save a victim from domestic violence if there are not harsher laws put in place that truly help protect a victim from their abuser. There needs to be stronger laws and penalties for the abuser and better ways of having a victim file a restraining order. Angie was working on a restraining order, and my family and I would often ask her, Angie, is it done? Did you do it? And her response to us was, you do not understand how hard it is for me to have to write down in detail everything that was done to me. It is very hard to have to relive all of those details, and it is not easy to just fill it out on the spot. There must be a way for the victim to tell their story without having them go through the pain of writing it down. We are in 2019, and we need to better utilize our technology to help our victims. There should not be a big gap period from the moment that the victim files a restraining order to the date of court.
In Angie's case, too much time went by, and by that time he had already talked her out of the last restraining order. I can only imagine how similar this story may be across any state. If you are in a relationship with someone who is threatening to kill you and has already hurt you on multiple occasions, that is not love. That is not a healthy relationship. Things will not change, and they will continue to escalate if you remain in the relationship. What is left when the person leaves this earth in such a tragic way is something that I wish upon no one. You have no idea the pain that we go through each day, knowing that you truly will never come back. You have no idea how hard it is to get up every day and continue life without your loved one that you saw on a daily basis. Everything reminds us of Angie. There are days that we just want to pick up the phone to talk to her and forget we can't. Her children now have to grow up and go through every milestone in their life without their mother and father. He didn't just take Angie from us. He took our whole world. He took his kids' world. If there is anyone in this room who is currently going through this, please listen to this and pretend that I am your mother, your father, your sister, or your brother. Pretend that I am your child. You need to leave that person now because you could be the next victim of domestic violence.
Sorry, this is all still very hard for us to talk about. And now Angie's daughter Maya has a few words to say. It might be difficult for her, so we appreciate your patience.
Hi, my name is Maya. Hi, my name is Maya, and this is my brother Alex. We are the children of Angelica Rios-Bueno. Yes, our mom died in a very sad way, and my brother and I witnessed it. My mom went through a lot of bad times. My brother and I always knew it. Knew it was not okay for the way that he spoke to her and treated her. It is not okay for anyone to be treated that way. My mom did not deserve this, and no one does. Although we are kids, we always knew what was going on. Even if they didn't tell us, we were pretty smart and pick up on a lot of things. I want to keep my mom's memory alive and let it be a reminder that domestic violence is real. And you need to know that as children, we saw the red flags. So don't think that your children do not know what is going on, because we do. We just don't know how to tell you because we trust your roots and trust that you are keeping us safe with your decisions. My brother and I are now without mom and dad, but because we are very lucky that God chose her to be our mom, we were raised to be strong and always be there for each other. We are very lucky to have an amazing family that loves us and will never give up on us. We will grow up and be good people the way that my mom did, that she could, to give us a good life and teach us right from wrong. She believed in helping others and put her trust in God. We are sad that we will never see our mom again, but we know that she is watching, that she is always with us in our hearts and watching over us from heaven. We will never forget our mom, and will always remember her as a mom that loved us, cared for us, loved life, and lived each day as if it was her last. Made others laugh, loved dancing and singing. We will not be silent. This will not be the last time you hear from us, so remember to speak up and let's end domestic violence.
And now we just have a few words from Attorney Jamie McClendon.
That was hard to follow. So I'm an attorney here in Racine. I'm going to just take this off because I'm taller. I'm an attorney here in Racine, and I am a defense attorney, which means that I defend a lot of individuals that are the abusers in this case. When Cindy asked me to speak, I was extremely honored because I want people to know what the victims go through from the other side, because I'm not unaware that there's the other side. And our justice system is not set up to make it easy for a victim to show up to court. As multiple people discussed today, it takes a lot of court dates to get through this system. And without the support of family, watching kids, dealing with leaving your job so that you can make these court dates, without that support, it's really hard to continue to keep coming. As it was already kind of alluded to, I did some research on this case. I've spoken on this case before, and I already knew what to look for. I knew that the date of the incident, the first time she called the police, I think it was in 2011, that there was going to be weeks that went by before the first court appearance. The second case, 3 months went by before the first court appearance. And why that's important is that there was time. There was time for him to come back and say, you need to tell him it didn't happen this way. I love you, I'm sorry, the flowers that are given, you need to tell him that I didn't do this. Because if you do, I'm gonna leave, and then what's gonna happen? How are you gonna take care of the children, and who's gonna be there for you? That feeling of isolation. So 3 months later, finally he's in front of a judge, and finally they can put conditions on his bond as to whether or not he can have contact with this alleged victim. But what has happened during those 3 months? Everyone has forgiven each other and has worked things out. Our justice system can do better. That at that initial time when that person is called the police, they need to put conditions on within 24 hours, not 3 months later. And that's possible. It takes more work, it takes more time on the DA's office, their side, but it should happen. Because now we have the ability, as technology was discussed as well, for that GPS bracelet. And they can put a protection around that person's house. But the second that person crosses that line, someone is notified and they will call the police. That would make a difference. This jail has the ability to block phone numbers. They should be blocking the phone numbers of these victims. And if at a later date a judge has decided that it's okay, then let the judge make that decision. As a defense attorney, the first phone call I get is never a surprise in a domestic case. It's always the victim. And the first thing that they tell me is that it didn't happen that way, the police got it wrong, and I don't want to press charges. But what I tell them is they're not the ones pressing the charges. It's the state of Wisconsin. And that takes the burden off of them. And I tell my clients the same thing. They're not pressing charges, it's the state of Wisconsin. But what could help the victim so that they don't have to keep repeating their stories over and over again every time they come to court, every time they meet a new police officer, every time they want to file a restraining order, is that body cam. I've been working in Racine as a defense attorney since 2011, and I finally had my first case where an officer turned on that body cam. And he was recording what this woman was telling him had happened within 24 hours. And it was different than reading a police report. In the police report, he would have said, and he did, that she appeared upset. But that can be a lot of things. But from the video, what it appeared to be was she was looking around. She kept waiting for someone to come through that door. You could tell she was waiting for someone to see her, talking to this police officer. So when I received a phone call 2 months later from her saying it didn't happen this way, but the police officers got it wrong, instead there's a video of her saying what it is that she wanted to say within 24 hours. And that made a difference in this case, because she couldn't come back later on and say it didn't happen or she never said it that way. And that's important because it's hard. It took a lot of bravery for a little girl to get up in front of this crowd and talk about something so personal. Now imagine having to sit there with a defense attorney like me who's grilling you and listening and having a jury judging you. It's a very, very different perspective when you're sitting in that hot seat. The other thing that I think that our court systems can do better is that right now, if there's one domestic case, that can result in 4 different courtrooms with 4 different cases. There's the criminal matter that can happen. If they want to file a restraining order, that's in a different courtroom. If they want to get divorced or have any kind of child custody, that's in a different courtroom. And if the children were involved, that's a juvenile court. Those are 4 courtrooms with 4 different appearances, with a bunch of different attorneys and a bunch of different judges. There is no reason for Racine County to not do what Milwaukee County is doing and having all the domestic cases in front of one judge. One judge can decide, based on the information provided, whether or not a restraining order needs to be put in place. One judge can decide what to do with the children if there's still issues within this family. And that's the concern, is that there's statistics that say it takes 7 times for a person to leave their abuser. And what happens in the court system is, unfortunately, in this case, I believe there was only a fine and court costs that this gentleman had as a sentence on 2 cases involving the same victim. One of them was $150 plus court costs. But what could change is that instead of just focusing, yes, signature line, instead of just having fine and court costs for a woman who was abused, is to work with the entire family, to not just give up. I've sentenced you, so now I'm on to the next person. Probation isn't enough because they're not able to watch everybody and they can still have contact with the person that they've abused. But just like our other treatment courts, where every other week they're expected to come back in front of the court and prove that they are doing what the court has ordered them to do, to have someone monitor them and then punish them right away if they don't, could make that difference. I'm sorry that this family has had to go through this, and it was, I guess I was hoping when I looked it up that it was different. But the court system needs to be faster and more efficient, and understand that every single one of these ladies that have gone off today, this happens in our courtrooms too many times, and we're failing them. So I suggest that you pay attention to the court systems, pay attention to what these sentences are. It doesn't mean that we want to destroy families. We want to make sure that everyone is healthy enough and strong enough that if they want to, they can make the best decisions for them. I know there was also a lot of discussion about as friends and family, what can I do when I know or I feel someone I love is being abused? The hardest thing is that you don't want to push them away, because you have to understand that a person who's abusing them is telling them, anyone that doesn't agree with us is against us. The best thing, and the only thing that I've learned through this, is that there's always has been a person for them that they know that they can vent to, that they're not being judged, or that they're being supported. And that's something else that our court systems need to change as well. That there needs to be more training on the part of the court staff and judges on how to deal with someone with domestic violence. I've seen judges get upset at victims who want to have contact with their abusers again. That's not appropriate. Just because you disagree and maybe they shouldn't have contact, you should not be lashing out on the victim. They need to understand that part of domestic violence is that pressure to forgive and that pressure to accept them back in. And as a judge, you still have the power to say, no, we're not going to let that happen. But you don't need to take that out on the victim. So from here, I really will hope that you guys pay attention to the court system. Pay attention to how long someone has called the police and how long they're placed in front of the judge and how long that case takes to resolve. And understand that every single time the victim has to talk about this story, that it is just them being re-victimized again, and we need to shorten that time. Thank you.
I'm here with the sister of Angelica Rios-Bueno, Cindy, and also Angelica's daughter. And just going to be asking them a couple questions in regards to domestic violence victims. Is there anything that you have to say that you would like people to know about what you've gone through with the loss of your mother to domestic violence?
I would say that losing a loved one through domestic violence is really hard. If you're going through domestic, get help and don't try to turn back, because if you do end up turning back and not getting the help that you need, things might not end well. Things might not end well.
Cindy, is there anything else that you would like to tell people in regards to domestic violence, or anything else that you would like everyone to know about your beautiful sister?
The only thing that I would like to say is that if someone is coming to you and they're telling you things are happening be a support system to them. You may not be able to get them out of it, but if you can be that support system, little by little, they might be able to gain that courage that they need to leave. In my sister's case, she was able to leave. However, you know, I think domestic violence, what people need to also be aware of is that even though you leave, it doesn't necessarily means that the domestic violence stops there.
For sure.
You know, you need to be careful if this person was violent and making threats and saying that they're going to kill you and was already violent with you. You need to be careful even after you leave the person.
Absolutely.
If he said he will kill you on numerous occasions, don't take it lightly, because chances are he will.
Right.
And in this case, he did.
Right.
So just tell everyone you know that this is happening. Don't keep it a secret. I know it's hard to say. Don't be ashamed of it, because I know many women are. But if you are able to just let people know what is going on, you will have more eyes on you. And if there is something that we can do to change the laws, we need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, we all need to get together as a nation and work on some of the things that were discussed today at this event, and not only to honor your sister, but to help prevent further domestic violence cases and deaths related to this. And we need to take women seriously about this, and when they say they're in harm's way, do whatever we can to get them through the criminal justice system quickly, and to help decrease their re-victimization so there's less shame involved, especially when they're already at a vulnerable place. And we're hoping that this video can help domestic violence victims, even if it's just one victim, hearing the stories today of her daughter, that her daughter gave, and of many of the victims today here. We're hoping that this can help save some lives, and we can help make some changes with national and state laws, with legislation in regards to domestic violence in our communities, and stop shaming women for the things that they're going through. And guess what, people? When somebody tells you they're being abused, 99% of the time they are. So they're not making it up. It's happening. And so we thank you for allowing us to come today, and we hope that this video helps honor your mother and your sister, and also helps prevent further domestic violence deaths.
Wow, that was such a powerful event, you guys. The women were so strong telling their stories. Renee's story was incredible, bringing people to tears. I'm just so glad that they had this event. Renee, how do you feel?
Yeah, thank you definitely to Divino Gelato Cafe for having this event today in downtown Racine on Main Street. And we are honored that we were here today to honor Angelica Rios-Bueno, who was killed by her ex in a domestic violence incident. And we hope that this event helps decrease domestic violence incidents and death. And thank you for watching, and it was just a fabulous event with true heartwarming stories, and there's really nothing else to say. I really can't say much more, because it was just very, very touching. And rest in peace, Angelica. You were loved. You were loved so much.
For sure. And remember, you guys, remember, if you can't keep it real,
then you can always come raw.
Raw topic. Till the next time, you guys. Peace.